All right, and we are live. Welcome to the first ParkNotes live stream. I don't know if this is going to be a continual thing because I don't think these are going to do well on my channel, but I figured if anyone's going to help it do well, it's going to be Jared Henderson. So Jared, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here, Parker.
Yeah, so I thought tonight we could talk. Well, so it's been a while. A lot of people keep recommending that we collab, and I'm like, yeah, we have. we've
Yeah,
done
we've
this like
talked before. We've talked before. This isn't like the first time. Yeah.
like we do. This is we talk off air often. So it's good to do it again, man. It's good to do it on ParkNotes. As we get in though, I have been meaning to ask you, like, how do you describe your YouTube work? Are you a booktuber? Are you a philosophy tuber? Are you a journal tuber, if that's a thing? Like,
yeah.
how do you describe it to people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not a journaling too, but even though that's like my biggest video and some of my biggest stuff, I probably will never talk about journaling again on the channel, just because I feel like I've said what I wanted to say about journaling. You now have my complete thoughts. I think that probably it's like somewhere between books and philosophy. But I don't do like a ton of the standard stuff you see on like sort of book YouTube of like, here's like my TBR, here's what I read this month. Here's, those they're fine videos. It's just not what I do. And I'm certainly moving a little bit more in the direction of just doing philosophy stuff. And figuring out how that's going to work for me exactly is like an interesting question, but it's definitely like kind of what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah. So let's say you bump into someone and you meet someone new and they're like, hey man, what do you do? And you want to tell them about YouTube. Like, what do you say? How do you describe it? Because I always am like, dude, I'm not sure. I talk about philosophy on YouTube kind of.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm a YouTuber. And then sometimes people just go, wow. And then like change the subject or like, oh, I didn't know that was a real job, or something like that. And then if they ask me, what's your YouTube about? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a philosopher. Because like that's what I am primarily. I'm a philosopher, and I talk about philosophy and I talk about books, and I just say it like that, and they go, "Oh, okay," and that's enough to kill interest for 95% of people.
That's right.
Like 95% of people are like, you know what? I think I've heard enough. I was hoping you would say like body cam footage and commentary, or like true crime or something. But
So
I don't do that stuff, so like I'm not that interesting to the vast majority of people.
I love that, man. Yeah, I'm gonna jack that because I almost every day I'll meet someone and they're like, yeah, what do you do? I'm like, yeah, I do stuff on YouTube. I'm like, sick. What do you do? I'm like, well, I talk about like notebooks and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know how to describe it. So I'm still working on my stuff.
Yeah, they think maybe like, oh man, I'm gonna be in like a cool prank video, or he's gonna offer me $1 million or something.
Yeah, right.
Something.
Yeah.
Like, no, man.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for someone to do that to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I want to talk about the Commonplace book boom of 2023. Like, what happened, dude? Both of our channels blew up because of Commonplace Books. Was YouTube just like accident? Was there a glitch in the algorithm? Why did everyone like Commonplace Books last year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so for like a little bit of context, like my like very first real video is about Commonplace Books, and it's like a blank book. It's a blank notebook, top down. My face isn't in it. I'm talking. I'm barely editing, and I'm just like talking about a Commonplace book. It's so bad, and it got like 100,000 views. I have no idea like how this could happen, but I think what kind of happened very broadly is that people wanted something that felt more real. There had been a huge like note-taking boom 5 years ago, maybe we might say it started. Notion got huge. Obsidian got huge. Rome Research was just like a thing no one talks about anymore, but it was like the thing for a while, right? It sort of imploded. But like there were like all of these like personal knowledge management systems. That was the phrase, right? You probably heard a lot of this.
Second Brains and
Second Brains. I mean, that book sold well and stuff, but I think that people found it refreshing to just be like, oh, I could just do this in a notebook, and there's not like a system to it. I mean, you can make a system out of your Commonplace book. John Locke had a system for his Commonplace book with all.
I'm still trying to figure that out, dude.
And I have like just never done that. There's basically just a repository where I just like write things down, and I think there's something about the simplicity of the idea, and then the fact that it's just like it's not digital. It's not on your computer. It's not on a screen, and I do occasionally get comments on those videos that are like, just use Obsidian. Just use and I always want to respond with like, it's just completely missing the point, because they'll be like, but it's so much more efficient. It's so much more like searchable. And I'm like, I know it's searchable. I know it's efficient. I'm like, I'm trying not to do that this time, right? I'm trying. And I think that, man, people just got sick of doing stuff on screens all the time. It's very funny to say this as I like look into a monitor and then people watch us on YouTube, but like it's like they I think that there's a certain kind of person who just doesn't want the most efficient thing. They
Yeah.
don't want like the most streamlined, searchable, whatever. So the commonplace book thing just seemed cool, by comparison. And also, frankly, they look good because they're like, you have this whole beat up journal at the end
Yeah.
that's just full of like other people's thoughts and you working out your ideas in
Yeah.
a way that like no database will ever feel that good.
Yeah. Dude, you're
And
right.
they look good on they look good on camera.
They look awesome. I have 2 that are, like, totally complete that I did all my theology papers when I was working my master's degrees, and I would just lines everywhere, and it looks like, creative genius, and, like, yeah, if
Yeah.
you read them, maybe not, but it looks really cool, and,
Certainly at least creative.
yeah, yeah, that's right. For me, man, I kept taking so many notes in my phone. I had a Galaxy Note, and I got it because you can take notes, got a little stylus and stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I thought about it, and I was like, "I've had this thing for since 2018," and then I got a new one, another note. I've never looked back at the digital notes, but I keep a
Mhm.
pocket notebook with me that I check 3 or 4 times a day. When I don't have that with me, I take a digital note on my phone. But whatever the case, I just can't remember stuff digitally as well. Like on my Kindle, when you highlight it, it creates like its own commonplace book in the back of the thing, and it's called clippings or something.
Yeah.
Is that right? Do other people's do that too, or is it just mine?
No, I think there's something like that, but man, the only note-taking version of things with Kindles that I do is
Yeah.
highlighting to export to Readwise for easy
Okay.
quoting later. That's all I do.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all I do for Kindle. I cannot use them to take notes. It's gotta be, I mean, so I look ridiculous like a guy like reading a Kindle with like a notebook next to him, but it's really the only way. And I don't know also if this ever happens to you when you're writing, but I find the experience of writing by hand to be more freeing than
Mm,
writing on a computer, in part because it frees me from having to edit.
yeah.
I always wanna edit while I write if I'm
Me too.
typing.
I'm exact same way.
I've been working on this book project and, I was, like, really struggling with this one section, and my wife was like, "Why don't you just, like, go somewhere, like, go to, like, the library," like, went to the public library and just, like, went to a quiet area there, and she's like, "Just take your notebook and just write." And I wrote, like, 5 pages in an hour,
Yeah.
like, by hand, and, like, that like, I was, like, really working through, like, some thoughts. And I think, I don't know, the experience of it is different. It's also there's fewer distractions as well. I mean, I don't know, it just struck something with me,
Yeah.
and so I wouldn't go back. I mean, I have Obsidian on my computer. I occasionally use it for, like, checklists for, like, bigger projects
Yeah.
where I know it's gonna be a little more malleable, but that's, like it's very much like a ad hoc when I need it kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's all it is. There's no system. There is no system whatsoever. If
Yeah.
anything, I'm like totally anti-system these days. Just
Yeah.
just get rid of the systems and just like do the work.
That's how I am too, man. We got a comment here. If I write by hand, I can recall the info easier. Digital, never the same effect. I actually feel the same way. So if I write, I'm big on marginal notes. If I write a note on the right side of the paper, like top right, I can remember it when I'm thinking back on it. If I do that on the Kindle Scribe, I don't know what page it was on. I didn't feel
Mm.
like the flip and stuff, and I don't, for whatever reason, I just can't remember as well. And I looked into some stuff. There's like some psychological literature on taking notes by hand, but I think it has more to do with condensing things and like putting them in your own words. But
Yeah.
I am ad hoc, like looking for information to back up my theory already, but that's not great science.
Yeah. I looked at this, I think, once, and a lot of it has to do with like recall test and like how you would do on exams or something.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's really hard to see how that fits into a much looser like creative process where creative here is very very broad.
yeah,
And so I don't know, but what I do know is this. I actually think this is kind of an important point. You could look for like all the studies in the world to back it up or not, but if
yeah,
you came up with all these studies where like actually you will remember more if you type, like I really don't feel that way when I'm doing it, and
yeah.
me feeling that way is probably just as important to it being true when it
Yes.
comes to my workflow, like me
Yeah.
actually getting writing done. So if you told me like actually there's a more efficient way to do it, it's backed up by the science with like a capital T and a capital S. Like I'm very happy for you, like that
Yeah.
you've been able to figure this out. But like I'm just gonna do this. And just because like, I don't know, you gotta figure out what works for you when you're creating stuff.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, man. Yeah. I wanted to write a book called like the Analog Renaissance, and I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not, but I'm putting it out here so no one can take that title. Because you said in Discord the other day that I need like a wagon to carry all my notebooks. Because unlike you, you've said all you want to say on YouTube. I've just like doubled down and been like, yeah, and another thing, I'm going to come up with another notebook idea, and I'm just like doubled down on the notebooks. And yeah, I have a ton of them. A lot of people think like I'm using them all the time every day. And I'm like, I've made 35 videos or something on no, I don't use them all every day. These are options for people, but since starting the YouTube game, my mind's just been open to like a bunch of different ways. Just they're not really like systems, like you were saying. It's just here's a concept and here's a way that you can use it or tweak it yourself. And so many people write me and are like, "This is great," and I'm like, "That's crazy. It's just a notebook, man. That's cool."
I mean, I found that typically nowadays I have like sort of my go-to journal. That's kind of my everything journal. And then I have a lot of like project notebooks.
Yeah.
So like I'm working on like this one project. Let me grab that. That's where I write my ideas down.
Yes,
And that's
dude.
where I like write those. And it's just because that way I can just look and say, so that means a thought about a project is in one of two places, like the general journal or like the specific journal. But I can eliminate like 5 other ones.
Yeah.
That just sit on my shelf. And a lot of those projects are kind of dormant. You know, I'm only ever working on like 2 at a time or so, but it's nice to have them kind of in a place.
I like the specific ones a lot because when I'm thumbing through, I remember stuff that I put in there before, and it kind of helps me like with my next project. That's why I love the specific one, and I think that's what like Thiago Forte was trying to do with the second brain stuff. But I've heard some of the bigger folks be like Ali Abdaal was talking with Cal Newport and was like, "Yeah, I never actually used my second brain." I was like, "Bro, you're live. We can hear you. You're like
Yeah.
sponsored by him."
You have 50 million views on you talking about second brain stuff.
Right. Maybe take it easy. Yeah, that was pretty good.
I mean, this is my worry about a lot of the content, and it's part of the reason I don't do journaling stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Is that it's just very, very faddish. It's very, very trend driven, and I found that like when people kept back in the note taking software days, people kept changing apps and software all the time, and actually it was Thiago Forte who just made this point. He's like, I think like the best thing I've ever done is just like never switched out of Evernote because he was like locked in, and he's like, cool. But I don't know. I just found there's always this like desire to do more on this stuff that takes away from the fact that these notebooks or these note taking or whatever this stuff is are only kind of instrumentally valuable for the projects or the things you're trying to accomplish, or just like the kind of state of reflection you're trying to achieve. So it's a weird case where the means kind of get elevated above the ends, and that kind of turned me off from a lot of the discussion. To be honest.
That makes sense, man. It becomes like a hobby, right? And I see this with sorry folks, but I do see this with like the Zettelkasten folks where they're like, Zettelkasten is it. And I'm like, man, you guys spend so much time doing that. That is your hobby. And that's cool, but it's kind of like, I don't want that hobby. So I've tried to start a Zettelkasten just for my audience a lot. And I'm like, you guys, a Commonplace book is so much better. Like, I can't do it. I'm sorry. So maybe I'll find some time, but I have seen the Zettelkasten drop. I used to get really aggressive comments like almost every day. Like, Zettelkast, you need to do it. And I've seen that drop off a little bit, thankfully. Well, dude, I don't think on the last podcast episode, I'm not sure if we talked about like how you got into philosophy, but I wanted to hear about that. Like, it's a weird thing. And I'm sure you've got the stupid joke where it's like, what's the difference between a pizza and a philosophy major? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm sure not a ton of people in your life were like, go into philosophy. So how'd you end up? You did 3 or 4 degrees in philosophy.
Yeah. I have 4 philosophy degrees. I majored in philosophy as an undergrad. I got a master's degree. When I started a PhD program, I transferred out to go to a different one. They gave me a master's on my way out. And then at my actual PhD program, I got a master's degree as part of the PhD and then got the PhD. So I have 4 philosophy degrees. Yeah. I chose to do philosophy. I actually applied to like my college as a philosophy major. I didn't transfer into being a philosophy major.
That's weird, dude. Most people aren't like that. This
is very, very uncommon. And I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to major in when I was when I was going to school, at least at first, like when I was in high school. I kind of had this thought that maybe I wanted to go into politics, which would be insane. Like that would be horrific.
Yeah.
This would be totally awful. But then I also thought maybe I wanted to become a lawyer. And this was like me at like 18, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted. But like I like to argue, etc. Like that. And I'd always been told you could be like a really good lawyer. And so I looked at like what are the majors that you could do if you wanted to be a lawyer, and philosophy was one of them. And then I just started like, and I didn't like investigate it super thoroughly. I just started like picking up some books at Borders
Nice.
before those closed, you know.
I still love
And I
Borders.
just I just go pick up some books. And I go look for some music, find a CD or something to, to convince my dad to buy. But then I would just read a couple of books, and I tried to read them, and I had no idea what I was reading. I was like totally lost, but it was invigorating enough that I wanted to go and major in philosophy. So I just started like that, and I actually started college as a double major with philosophy and English
Mm,
because I've always loved to read, and
okay.
and I always loved literature, and English was usually my favorite class in high school. And I dropped my English major after a year because I wanted to take more philosophy classes.
Wow.
So I just and I went to this weird undergrad program where there was this honors college within it, and it was like tutorial based. So my
Mm,
philosophy classes were actually tutorials with one-on-one with professors, or
wow.
maybe like 3-on-1 with like 3 students.
Yeah.
And I was like that for both English and philosophy, and I just liked the way the philosophy department did it better, and I could just take as many philosophy classes as I want. I had no gen ed requirements in undergrad. So
Dude, this is so weird. That's like UK
I
school or something.
I
Wow.
exactly. It was this school in Ohio that just like wanted to model themselves after like Oxford and Cambridge. And so like
Totally.
50 years ago they started doing this, and they only took like 200 across the 4 years. So like 50 a year could
Hmm.
get into this at a school of like 20,000. So it was
Wow.
like pretty, it was like this weird experience, and it attracted total weirdos, right? So all the guys I like was like super close with in college were like the weirdest people.
Yeah.
And all incredibly intelligent, like way smarter than me. Like one of them became like a Marshall scholar, and like, you know,
Wow.
is now like an astrophysicist and like discovers black holes and stuff. But
That's
you know,
crazy.
anyway, like so something was so stimulating about just like sitting across a desk from a professor and like arguing about Plato.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, cool. And I was like, this is something that I could just do forever. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll do it forever. I'll go and get a PhD. And that was that was the idea, you know. And I got into grad school, and went to one grad school, like I said. Went there specifically like work with one guy who retired and then very shortly after died.
Oh
And
yeah.
so everyone's like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And like from all reports, he was a jerk. So actually I might have like dodged a bullet here.
Whoa.
But I then went to a different PhD program like 2 years later, and that was great. It was like the perfect fit for me. And yeah, just did that. And then I left. I left, and I actually have a video coming out fairly soon about going into even more detail about like why, even if I had like a tenure track job lined up, I probably wouldn't go back to academia.
Yeah.
And it's much more like like a systemic critique of the university system
Yeah.
rather than anything about the subject matter. Like I would love to be in seminars again. I would love, you know, all this stuff. I just think like the American university system is um troubled. Let's put it that way. I think it's a little bit troubled, and so I
Yeah.
want to. I don't really want to be a part of it.
I hear you. I'm waiting to make all those videos until I get in and then finish a PhD program, so then I can start
That's the
talking
first
about
step. You gotta kind of like earn the right to talk crap about it, you know.
Right.
So, but
Right.
you gotta live
Right.
it for a little longer.
It
Yeah.
is pretty wild the amount of PhDs being produced, and like I have so many friends in philosophy and theology, and I have so many friends now in the job market, and I'm like, bro, what were you doing? What were you thinking? Like,
Yeah.
if
No,
you took out debt, that's crazy.
yeah. One, for anyone listening to this, do not take out debt to go to grad school.
Hmm.
Absolutely not. Do not do it. It is a ridiculous idea. You take out so much debt, and I mean, I can almost say with confidence, you will not get a job.
Yeah.
I don't mean this is like no one ever gets a job, right? The people get jobs, but I don't know, maybe even 50%. Is that generous to say get jobs? Okay, so you have a
Might be
50-50
less. Yeah.
coin
Yeah.
toss, and then you got people taking out sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for this. So only go to a PhD program if they will pay you because you will teach.
Hmm.
Like only do that. That is the only way I would recommend it, because the market is not stable enough. It is not. It is not. And more faculty positions are becoming contingent. So you get, you know, one semester at a time you get a contract, you get
Some of
paid
my friends are like that too. Yeah.
$4,000 a class, you're squeaking by, man. And so so I kind of like went like the super easy route for a while and went into tech,
Yeah.
which just was like the money was there and that was great. And now I do this, the money is less there, but it's like it's really liberating, it's really freeing. And there's something to be said about being self-employed and making content. It's not everyone can do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it has its challenges and its downsides, but there are a lot of really big advantages too.
We used to always joke. So in my theology programs, I'd always was like the philosopher trying to like jam in, shoehorn in philosophy. And then I went to a philosophy program as well. But we used to always joke about not having jobs. I was on scholarship and I was getting free ones at other places. So that was cool. But we were always like, well, there's Tom Morris, who was at Notre Dame, and now he gets like $250,000 per speech that he gives to giant companies. So you could be a philosopher like that, or you can go into tech if you study logic. And then I met you and I was like, well, I know one person who's done that. That is a kind of a viable option, but if you're not a big logic guy, then maybe you don't make it in the AI world. But I do tell people who are like, yeah, I want to do more philosophy. I'm like, you should probably do like a Substack. You should probably do like a YouTube channel. You should probably get some of your ideas out there. You should probably learn. Like, there are other options. The plan B is plan A nowadays. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to teach philosophy unless you teach it online on YouTube, and you should know what you're saying for sure. But you will get some comments if you don't. So, or if you
Yeah,
do,
the internet will try to correct you. They
yeah,
don't always know what they're talking about when they try to correct you, but they will try to correct you. And sometimes
that's
they're
right.
right.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's
like,
true.
I think for instance, I'm gonna eventually start doing philosophy courses that I
Neat.
like sell through the channel, somehow. I haven't
Be
worked out the
awesome.
format exactly, but I'm probably gonna do it within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
I've been kind of like half planning it for a while. And I actually think it will be a better experience than when I was teaching at universities because one, it won't cost students nearly as much.
Right.
And they will actually be kind of locked in. They'll have like they're into it,
Yeah. No one's
and so
making them go there, and yeah.
yeah. And so, the trick to that is you got to price it so that people can actually afford it, but also price it so that like you feel some level of commitment to actually attend and
Totally.
stuff. And so that it's like actually worth your time, both for them and for me. But if you can find that nice balance and then just do, what they don't even have to be semester length, right? The semester is kind of itself kind of a weird thing.
Mhm.
You don't have to inherit that timeline
Yeah.
if you go outside of the academy. So it could even just be 1 month and we do like one focused topic, or we do a 3 month one. They could be variable length. I mean, there's all kinds of freedom there. And I actually think that they could do pretty well, not in the sense of like financially here, but actually in the sense of like people could get something out of it.
Are you
And
thinking of teaching live and interacting with the students?
two versions of it. One
Yeah.
of them is to teach like a self-paced class to
Yeah.
create it and that you
That
could
makes
buy it. And that would be way more affordable, right? Because it doesn't
sure.
cost me anything per student. And then occasionally to teach live versions
Mm.
where I would only take 20 people.
Yeah.
And so the economic reality of that is that just you have to charge more because of like you got limited spots, right? But and it has to be worked out on the time. But on teaching the live ones, that would actually be maybe set up a separate Discord for it, and
Yeah.
then we do Zoom calls once a week that are 2 hours long for 2 months or something like that.
Yeah, dude, that sounds awesome.
That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. Yeah.
I've never thought of teaching like interactively over Zoom. I started my podcast because one of my friends, he totally imploded and blew up, but he roped a bunch of us, like a bunch of PhDs and then me, into starting an online. He was calling it online seminary, and we are going to do it. It was awesome, dude. I planned out like 4 or 5 classes on philosophy of religion, going through planning his stuff and like next level stuff. And then he like blew up and imploded. And after that, I was like, I have all this content. Let me just like start a podcast. And I started just reaching out to all the people. And so that was like the goal from the start. I never thought about teaching it. That sounds awesome, man. That sounds like a really good idea. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
thinking of
So
I'll just teach stuff and do it like YouTube members and all the members get it, but yours is more interactive. You're actually teaching people stuff.
it's one way you could do it. I mean, one way of thinking about it is that if you teach the live class, since you can only teach it a few times and like you're limited, teach the live class and then turn that into something else later that could be repackaged
Yeah.
for people who can't attend live. Because
Right.
there's a couple of reasons for that. Like I have a big international audience. They're not going to be able to make it to like Texas time classes that
Right.
fit in with like my kid's sleep schedule.
Yeah.
And then also there are going to be people who would be like, I would love to pay you this much money for a prepackaged one, but I couldn't afford a live one. And
Right.
I want to say, folks, when I say that, I mean, I'm trying to keep it affordable regardless, but it has to be enough that I'm not like doing it for free. You know, like
Yeah.
that's basically the balance I'm trying to strike here. And so you want to have those levels of accessibility, right?
Yeah.
There. But also, I just miss kind of teaching people. I miss like being in front of people and teaching them.
Totally.
So yeah, um, that's the uh, that's what you got to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I wanted to ask you about the science fiction and fantasy stuff too.
Okay.
It's so
Yeah.
funny when I hear you on other people's shows, the stuff you say, it's like, dude, I totally resonate with what you're saying. I heard you on someone's channel, and you were talking about how you have a really hard time remembering names in science fiction or fantasy, and I'm like, dude, me too. I have a notebook where I have to write down the names of the characters because I'm an ideas guy. I can't remember this
Yeah.
guy's name that the author just made up. But you said you've been reading for a while. Like, were you reading science fiction and fantasy like in high school or in?
Pretty much my whole life, I was reading at least
Oh
a
wow.
little bit. One, I would say more books need like a dramatis personae section. They should just
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah.
It
Right.
rules. It's good to have. I mean, I was reading, but I was reading some of the stuff in high school. Well, in high school, I got kind of into like my like serious literature phase, where I like really wanted to be taken seriously. So that so maybe less stuff there. I just want to call it. There's one as asked in the chat a few times if the VOD's going to be available. The VOD for this should almost definitely be available. You're going to leave it up, right?
I don't. What's a VOD?
Video on demand. Are you
Oh,
going to leave the
yeah.
live up, or are you going
I'll
to
leave
like
it up.
delete it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's going to be available. Yeah.
Nice.
I think this is like a Twitch thing. This is like how they describe it as like a
Okay.
stream and a
Okay.
VOD. But
Yeah, for sure.
it's
It's
going to be
staying up,
available.
folks. Yep.
Yeah. So the I mean, early on, like reading C.S. Lewis or something as a kid was a big thing. Harry
Yeah.
Potter was like huge for me because like I was like the perfect. I'm like just that age of millennial for it for it to have been like a
I would have
really,
been too. I had
really
my
big deal for
evangelical
me.
parents would not let me have
Yeah,
that, but later. Yeah.
my parents were chill for Baptist, but they were chill.
Yeah.
Then I think probably I kind of stopped reading fiction in general eventually through college. I think I read the Game of Thrones books,
Okay.
The Song of Ice and Fire in college because that's when like the show was coming out.
Mhm.
But I wasn't reading a ton of fiction at the time because I was just reading more philosophy or just drinking a lot. Like yeah,
Yeah.
there were and it probably wasn't until about halfway through grad school that I started reading a lot more. And I started doing kind of just a mix from the get-go, like, you know, a little bit of science fiction, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of like serious literature, a little bit of like nonfiction stuff. I just like have always been a fairly eclectic reader.
Mhm.
I kind of can't fathom being one of these guys who's like, I read epic fantasy and that's it. Like I just can't. If that works for him, I guess like go for it, man. But like I can't fathom being that guy.
Yeah.
And so I have always been someone with like a lot of interest who always felt like I was getting pulled in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah.
And so science fiction and fantasy was just one of the many directions I could go. And then when I got onto YouTube, I would start talking about science fiction and fantasy in relation to philosophy, or, you know, the first time I ever mentioned science fiction and fantasy on the channel is a video that's something like science fiction and fantasy with like big ideas and great prose. The
Mm.
idea was like that was my polite way of saying science fiction and fantasy that doesn't suck.
Yeah.
And I totally got raked over the coals by people being like, you're like an elitist about genre. And I should have, at the time, I was like, oh no, I'm not. I should have doubled down and be like, yeah, I'm being an elitist.
Yeah,
Like,
that's right.
That's what I put in here. And I'm saying that some of it sucks and this stuff doesn't. Yeah. So I mean, it's always kind of been with me, and it's nowadays it's what I read at night before I go to bed,
Mm.
Which has made those like super long epic fantasy series like impossible to read.
Yes.
Because I'm just too tired and I'm like my eyes can't stay open. And I'm like, man, if you make me pronounce, you know, like if you read like a George R.R. Martin book, there's like he jokes about the fact that he gives like, you know, he's got 7 kings that are all some variation of Aegon. And you're like, I would not possibly be able to fathom like which Aegon we're talking about right now. So this is not the book for me.
Yeah. Well, so when I was in grad school for philosophy, that's the only way I could go to sleep, because I would be podcasting or reading some kind of deep philosophy, and my mind's churning. The only way I could wind down is reading science fiction or fantasy before bed. And then I started thinking like, hey, I want to write about this, and I want to do YouTube videos. So now I have to like intently sit down and actually mark them up. So I kind of lost that, which is kind of a bummer. But yeah, I would do the exact same thing. And my big ones, I didn't realize I have a weird self-conception. Like I focus on one thing in my life. So right now,
Mhm.
if you ask me, I would probably tell you like I'm only reading epic fantasy, and then I look around at my list. I'm like, no, I'm reading philosophy and all sorts of
Yeah,
self-help,
yeah.
all sorts. But that's the only thing I'm like really focused on. And in college, I was a wrestler, and I always found like motivation from reading Conan the Barbarian. I was like, that's me, dude. I'm gonna
Okay,
be a
yeah.
barbarian. I had no
Yeah,
idea
yeah,
that
yeah.
I was like a nerd like that, but I had pictures of Conan's like
Well, Conan's like
the book.
smart too. In
Yeah,
the
man.
books, Conan's like really smart. In the movies, he's not smart, right? But
Right. He's just a dumbass. Yeah.
Conan's really intelligent. He's
Yeah.
so yeah, I can kind of see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my guy, man. So I grew up on that, and then I
Except
never
I'm gonna
thought.
say it, man. I think Robert Howard. It's hard to read some of that stuff, man.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't enjoy it when I've tried to read Conan. Yeah. There's stuff
dude.
from around that time, like Edgar Rice Burroughs. I can enjoy
Yeah,
reading.
yeah. He's
But
got a bunch too.
I don't know Robert Howard. I cannot. I'm not super into.
Well, I don't I hadn't read a bunch of other good books. It was just like Conan. Like this is my
Okay.
thing. So
Yeah.
it was like that. And then people would ask me if I like science fiction. I'm like, I don't think so. And then I was reading everything Philip K. Dick wrote. But I'm like,
Yeah.
I just like Philip K. Dick. I don't know if I like science fiction. And then I'm starting to, broaden my horizons some more here. But is you said you want to do more philosophy. Do you think you're going to continue on with the science fiction and philosophical themes in there, or
A little, maybe occasionally. I'm working on this video. Talked about it on so many streams lately, actually, that if I don't ever make it, it's going to be a problem. I am working on it. It's not science fiction; it's fantasy, but a philosophy of the Lord of the Rings video that
Okay.
I think will be really long. And the problem is, like, I have to reread a lot of stuff
Oh, I saw you reading
because
Kreef's book on that. Yeah.
that book sucks. That book's awful. I'm sorry. Like Creep's actually a really intelligent guy and really
Totally.
thought that book sucks.
Yeah,
So that
man.
book's no help at all. And
Yeah.
I saw like another YouTuber being like, I'm drawing heavily on this as I talk about the philosophy of Tolkien. I was like, all right, this video sucks
Yeah.
because like I hate that book. And the word I think he can just do way better. But anyway,
That's good to know, dude. I have it over here on my Tolkien shelf, so and I haven't done it yet. So that's a really good tip that
yeah,
that you don't like it.
not worth it.
Don't mention
Not
them.
worth it at
Yep.
all. So I've recently, by the way, decided to start telling people when I don't like things online. I used to always be like super diplomatic about this, but I've
Yeah.
decided now like no, the book sucks. Like you can just say it sometimes.
Yeah.
But there are other books that are sort of about aspects of Tolkien's thought. I find with Tolkien in particular, his fans are I don't mean the average fan on the street. I mean the fan who would write something about him
Yeah.
tend to be a little insufferable.
Hmm.
And like they like always call him like the professor in their writing
Oh,
or something.
okay.
It's like Aristotle. It's like Aquinas talking about Aristotle,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
like,
Or
look, dude,
anyone else talking about Aquinas.
I like
Yeah.
Tolkien too, but like he's not Aristotle here. Like
Yeah.
so it's just like weird stuff like that. But there is some insightful stuff, and I'm working on that, and I'd like to do more of these like philosophy of with these like larger media things.
Yeah.
Because I think um some of these works deserve to be taken seriously
Mhm.
in a way, and to be analyzed in terms that are maybe not always that can be a little foreign to most of their readers, but that you could talk about in kind of an interesting way. And
Totally.
I kind of want to do that with just like a lot of different media properties. I want to do it with more manga because I that's also something I read for fun.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do it with some science fiction stuff probably. I feel like I saw someone mention the Horus Heresy in chat, so I feel like it
Yeah, I
would
was
be
just about to
fun.
ask you. Yeah.
It would be fun to do a philosophy of 40K
Yeah.
video, but there's so much to read, and like I don't want to slog through those novels, man. Like so there's
Dude, it's
so many.
crazy. I was
Yeah,
invited to a theology book on that to contribute, and one of my friends came on the podcast, really good theologian, awesome guy, and so he gave me a bunch of resources, and I was listening to this podcast on it, Lorehammer, and if I don't know if those guys are listening or anything, probably not, but It's tough, dude. It's really tough to get into. I found a bunch of good YouTube stuff that's way easier. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm getting into. But everyone's like, well, that's not it. Here's a starting place. Here, start here, start here. Someone did tell me to go play some games at like a local club, and I'm like, there's local clubs? That's crazy. So I have to go and
I used to live near one here in Austin.
Did you check it out ever?
Yeah. I
Okay.
I paint Warhammer minis. I
Oh,
never talk
dude,
about this.
that's hilarious.
But I never play. I never play. I
Okay.
just paint them because like I find them so much. They're so enjoyable to paint, which is which is an incredibly stupid hobby to start because it is so expensive. But
Yeah.
like they're so fun to paint and to like think about. But I never play. But yeah, I used to buy stuff from a place that had 4 or 5 tables open where you could do wargaming, and there would be
Okay.
at least one night a week was just a Warhammer painting night you could go to.
Wow.
And
Okay.
and then there would also be Warhammer nights, and there was like Magic the Gathering going on in the back or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it was like a genuinely like great game store if you're thinking about like a games and comics shop. If you're ever in Austin, I'll show it to you.
Yeah,
Right? So,
dude. I mean, can you say it without like doxing yourself and
well, I
putting
mean,
on?
I don't live next to it anymore. It's called
Oh yeah,
Dragon
so
Slayer.
Dragon Slayer in Austin.
In North Austin. So
Nice.
yeah, it was it's great. But yeah, absolutely, if you do not paint minis currently, do not do it because man, like one box of like a combat patrol, which is a very particular rule set, which I don't even care about the rules, but I know this fact. It's going to be like $50 or something, and then you got
Dang.
Anyway, so a philosophy of Warhammer thing would probably be fun to do,
Yeah.
but I don't know, like I don't want to read all of those books.
Yeah.
I just
No,
don't
I
want to.
I feel you on
I
that.
want to read stuff that I probably know would be like I have friends who are super into the Warhammer lore and stuff,
Mhm.
and who also play. And I would be like, what book should I read? And they'd be like, well, you should read this series, but just know that books like it's an 18 book series, and just
Yep.
know that like
Yeah.
books 1, 3, 7, 8, 9, 12, and 15 are all terrible. But
You have to read them.
that sounds
Yeah.
awful. So yeah.
Dude, there's so many things to get into. I didn't know I was this big of a nerd until like I took a step back and looked at my life and was like, holy cow, dude. I have to like limit the amount of like nerdy stuff that I get into. I'm trying not to get back into like Legos. I'm like, dude, stop. Can you
Just don't
just
do
like
it. Yeah.
focus? Can you just
Your
focus?
your rule should be something like no hobby that requires regular infusions of cash.
Yeah.
It-
Well, dude, so
aside from books, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, that's a big problem. So I'm launching a new channel called Truth Suffers, and it's on science fiction and philosophy. And so we're gonna have to do one of these too if I can get more of your time. But I started collecting all the old school covers because I'm like modern covers blow so bad
Yeah.
and
Modern covers are so bad.
just awful. And
They
it's like,
used to be
dude,
so good.
they were so awesome. Like Bob Pepper and John Schoenher and some of these older artists. You're just like, dude, that's beautiful. So I have all these like prints now that I'm trying to hang up on my wall.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like just on eBay too much and I have to take it off my phone now because that's become my problem.
I have a this is fantasy stuff again, but I have a hardback book, a collection that is all it's book covers and paintings for books by Michael Whelan.
Mm,
And it's kind of a collectible thing that I was able to get from a friend once,
nice, dude.
which just rules. And he's like the guy who did all of the Wheel of Time covers.
Okay.
He does Sanderson's covers currently. He's like a really big name in the especially fantasy book cover. Like if you
Yeah, I
want that
haven't
kind
heard
of
of him.
old school painting vibe
Yeah.
to it. Yeah.
I'll sit now. Thanks, dude. I have another one on the list. I have been collecting those as well. Like, so I have a few books over. I have a whole section now of books just like that. I've collected covers. Chris Foss is a really he's got a book called Hardware, and it's just all his like spaceships. And you look at it and you're like, well, now I see where George Lucas got all of his ideas from. Holy cow, dude, Death Stars and everything. Yeah.
If you could ever look at the art levels or the art design for Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Have you
Chris
looked at
Foss.
that stuff? Have you watched the documentary about
I
this?
did. I watched it. That dude was pretty wild, throwing his naked kid around a lot too. But yeah, that's a
But
wild
think
documentary.
just the art
Totally.
styling
Yeah.
has influenced so much stuff. It's like the most influential non-existent movie.
Right.
Yeah.
I want that poster too. That poster's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good, dude.
I mean, I liked the new Dune, but like I don't know. Every time I watch this, I like see it. I'm just like, I really wish I could watch Jodorowsky's Dune. Like I wish I could see it.
I've been thinking. I try not to think about this too much because it messes with me a little bit. I'm like, what would our society look like if Dune came out for Jodorowsky? Like, what would society be like? Because there's so many Star Wars fans, right? Would it be like that for Dune? Would Star Wars even exist? Like, that's a
Alien
weird
Alien wouldn't
counterfactual.
exist, for instance, or like Predator wouldn't exist. Yeah, because a bunch of the art stuff gets reused for that.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
Super weird. Well, I'm gonna tell the audience here, hey, we're gonna take some more. I'm gonna start looking at the chat here because I want to answer some of your questions since you're here as well. But I have a bunch of random questions for Jared. So can I? They're either ors. You can. I guess you can deny them. But
I'm gonna open a beer before this just in case.
Yeah. So it's gonna be X or Y. And unless you're like a subclassical guy, I guess you can pick something else. But
I am a subclassical logician, by the way.
I thought you weren't. I thought you were just using the null operator for like
no. I went to UConn, so like I'm just like I'm a little skeptical of excluded middle, and actually my stuff about truth tells me that I can't accept excluded middle except in context, like certain context. Yeah.
What do you do with the strengthened liar?
Well, I'm not solving the liar's paradox from this stuff.
Okay.
I just don't think that the world bifurcates. Like I just like it's literally just a view about negation. Like here. So what do you do about the liar? The liar is like this is so okay. What you have just done is a very normal thing, which is like you've looked at it and you're like, oh, a subclassical view. Therefore, you must be solving the paradoxes with it. I got this when I did my degrees of truth stuff too, because my dissertation defends the idea of degrees of truth. Like, so you're talking about vagueness. Vagueness shows up in one paragraph of my dissertation to explain that I'm not talking about vagueness. So like I have a very, very, very weird view of the liar paradox and probably all paradoxical sentences that we could maybe talk about on a more philosophy centric thing sometime. But that everyone in my department was like, that is the most insane thing you believe. So it's completely unrelated to that.
That's good.
I just don't trust classical logician. It was invented by Germans in like the 19th century, and very few good things come from that era.
That's good. All right, well let's get in here. So folks, drop your questions. I'll be looking at them and I'll drop those in as well. But first question, C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien?
Yeah, Tolkien. Yeah. C.S. Lewis is interesting. I am a fan, but Tolkien's more interesting and just a better writer, like prose stylist. Yeah.
Dang. Okay. If I were asked, I'd have to go with Lewis. That's funny. That's good, dude. That's good. I like to hear it.
Do you have do you have a favorite Lewis book, fiction or nonfiction? You could divide those if you like.
Miracles for nonfiction, just because I love that argument from reason type stuff, and I trace some history on it, and I love that, dude. I love thinking about that. And then nonfiction, either Out of the Silent Planet or
you flip those. You just said nonfiction for those.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. For fiction. Yeah. Out of the Silent Planet or Till We Have Faces. I really like Till We Have Faces.
Yeah. Interesting.
What about you? What you got a favorite, Lewis?
Abolition of Man or The Discarded Image when it comes to nonfiction.
Ooh, those are
and
good.
Then I used to say Paralandra for fiction, but it's Screw Tape Letters. Yeah. Super. I feel like that's like the obvious choice if you're not going to choose a Narnia book, so no one does, but like it's the best. So
it's so good. It's so good.
It's not messy like many of his other books. Many of his other books get like a little convoluted or weird or something. So
it's so crisp, and everyone wanted him to write more, and he's like, I can't get back in the headspace. Sorry. It's too tough.
Yeah, so that's it.
So journal or commonplace book?
Just a journal, because it can do the commonplace. It can do a lot of the stuff I like to do with a commonplace book, because I'm very unstructured and unsystematic about it. So just have a journal. Yeah. That's my advice. I recently had this. I know I'm ruining your question game, but
dude, no, I recently I thought it was good to expand on.
I recently had this realization that like if you took all of my advice on my channel and distilled it to like the core insights, the top one is that if you care about something, you should write it down. That's all it is.
So good. Yeah. That's really good. Everyone's going to steal that and make that a YouTube title now. Yes. That's good. Science fiction or fantasy?
Really tough. I think probably science fiction. Yeah.
Me too. I like that.
Yeah.
Here's one from the audience here. What's Jared's elevator pitch for virtue ethics?
Like, do you realize like all other ethical theories are bad, and yet you still want to be kind of a good person?
Mm.
No, but the more serious one is like this. When I talk about what it is to be good, do you want like a set of rules or a set of like procedures, or do you want to be a better person? Because oftentimes you actually want to answer that second question, and virtue ethics is the theory that addresses that question fundamentally.
Yeah. That's good. Do you ever play with mixing them around and saying like virtue ethics as the center of the gem, and because of that we get to have some consequences and stuff, or are you just like virtue all the way, screw everything else?
Well, no, I mean, like the virtuous agent cares about consequences.
Sure.
The virtuous agent cares about these things, but also what it admits is that I think probably the most honest version of a virtue ethicist becomes kind of a moral particularist, that there aren't like fully general rules for action
Particularism for the win. Yeah, dude.
other than a kind of semi-vacuous, like do what the virtuous man would do thing. But like it ends up being kind of particularism, which I just think is probably true.
Yeah.
And utilitarianism leads to a kind of like alienation where your own moral reasoning kind of alienates you from the subject.
Yeah.
And Kantianism, I've just never seen the pull of being a Kantian. So I feel like one day I need to study Kant more to like really understand it. But yeah.
That's good. That's so good. Okay. Sun Eater or Dune?
I'm sorry, Christopher. It's gonna be Dune. It's gonna be Dune.
Dude.
Yeah. That's really a lot of things. You could put X or Dune, and for a lot of values of X, the answer is Dune.
Right. I mean, he's not done yet, too. So you get to say like, hey, maybe if we're done, Christopher, but yeah.
That part's true. Also, I think he wants to write an epic fantasy one day. I heard him talk about this once. I'd like to see him do that too.
Totally.
Then we could have talks. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's another Sun Eater one. So Sun Eater or Book of the New Sun. I think you've read that.
Yeah. I've read it. Book of the New Sun. Like I love Sun Eater, but yeah, Gene Wolfe is just You're like putting like the best of you are putting. Have you seen my top 10 fantasy books or my top 10 science fiction books?
Where do you think I'm getting this stuff from? Yeah,
You're like next you're gonna be like Ursula K. Le Guin or Sun Eater. I'm sorry again, Christopher, but like Le Guin tops it all. Yeah, you're gonna make him feel very bad.
Yeah. He's getting some good play. He's fine. Philosophical logic or stoicism?
Probably philosophical logic.
Yeah. Oh, snap, dude. Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of pitting your academic philosophy against your public philosophy. That was my intent with that one.
I've never been able to figure out a way where I could make like a cool, fun, accessible philosophical logic video.
Yeah.
And if I could ever figure that out, maybe it would be.
You're the guy to do it. Cool. I've been waiting for it. Yeah, man.
But I have no idea. I'd like to make something on paradoxes. I feel like that one's cool because they're like puzzles and people get drawn into them. Yeah, I actually think I spent the last like 2 years talking about Stoicism a ton, really reading through like a ton of the Stoics.
How long were your Substack? It was like over a year that you were reading through.
Yeah, it took 18 months. Now there were like some big breaks because I wasn't publishing as frequently and stuff, but like it took 18 months where I went through the meditations and I read it 3 times for that, like in total. And I have come to the conclusion that there are many things to learn from Stoicism, but that I am not a Stoic. Like fundamentally, I'm not a Stoic. And so I think that's going to kind of tip the scales away from Stoicism.
Totally. I get this a lot. People often call me a Stoic. And I'm like, what have I said that's made you think that I'm a Stoic? Like, I appreciate the way that they write. I like that they have notebooks and like I talk about, but yeah, I'm not, I think it's a little bit goofy to call yourself a Stoic today. Maybe not, but I actually had a random question from before about Stoicism. Stoicism has a lot of weirdness in it, a lot of, the metaphysics of fire and stuff like that too. But they also were theists. And so I was wondering, like, do you think modern Stoics should be theists at least? Should they believe in like a corporeal God if they're gonna bite it? Should they bite it all the way or what?
Massimo Pigliucci recently wrote a thing about this actually on his
Hmm.
Substack, and he's like, "Of course not," because he says that the Stoics had no good reasons to believe in God, like all their arguments were bad. I think that's a little too far, but it's just that I think that Stoicism Stoicism is such a big tent when you look at the history of it.
Yeah.
Even before you get to the modern Stoics, there's just been
Sure.
so much variation. But what I would say is this: if you are not a theist, and I guess you would have to be a particular kind of theist that believes that God is good. You could always imagine like the dark theist,
Right.
but if you're not, if you don't believe in like a providential like logos in the universe, then what happens is many Stoic, common old Stoic arguments fail.
Hmm.
They need providence, basically.
Right. Exactly. Providence.
And
Exactly.
so, how Massimo once put it to me was that the trick for him is not to think about how it's actually good. The trick is to think, how can I endure this?
Mm.
But that kind of admits that it's bad,
Yeah. Right. You
right?
don't need to
And the
endure. How
old,
do I endure the puppies licking my face
yeah,
and
yeah.
me
So,
eating cotton
so
candy?
the ancient Stoics didn't accept that it was bad. So, what I would say is this: removing theism from the picture of Stoicism changes it
Yeah.
severely.
Yeah.
I don't think that that means you couldn't be an atheistic Stoic. It's just that the consequences. I mean, it's basically just like, imagine if you had this logical system and and it had 5 axioms and you removed one of them. It
Yeah.
would be a different system. Like it would
Yeah.
be a different, and that's fine, right? But it changes the character of the teaching quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I might think that axiom is a little bit more like load bearing as well, where it's like, because you need the providence, you need the trust in the logos to think that things are going to be cool. Otherwise, why am I enduring this in the first place? Right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah, that's good. So that brought up another random one for me. This is about philosophical methodology. Um, Stoic, peripatetic, or academic?
About methodology.
So yeah,
Yeah,
should we
yeah.
sit doing philosophy in the square? Should we walk around doing philosophy, or should we do it in the special place where the philosophers go?
Oh, you should almost certainly do it while walking.
Okay.
That's just because, like, man, it's just good. It's just good to walk more, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just good. I had a professor actually in my undergrad days who was one of my tutorial teachers, so it would just be me and him. And sometimes he and I would do our tutorials walking around campus.
Wow. Okay.
We would walk for 2 hours and talk about philosophy.
That sounds pretty fun, actually,
Dude,
man.
I went to college basically in like a movie. Like, yeah.
That's good. That's really good. Okay, let's go. BookTube or PhilosophyTube?
I don't watch a ton of. I watch selections from both, but I don't
Yeah.
watch a ton of either actually.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to say none of the above. I watch some of a little bit of both. But man, if I looked at my current, I'm just gonna pull up my homepage and just like say some stuff that popped up
Yeah.
based on this. So this could be bad. Let's see. A few tech things, camera stuff, because I looked at this, some comedy stuff. Yeah, I try not to actually watch a ton of YouTube. So, but when I do it, it's like almost pure entertainment.
Yeah.
So that's yeah.
Dude, I go through phases, but right now I think if I pulled up mine, it would be all Batman the animated series stuff. Just like Serum Lake. Shout out to that channel. That's a really good channel, and that I don't know. It's the same episodes. We're all talking about it. Like it's been years and years, but I can watch them forever.
And like literally my favorite YouTuber right now,
Yeah.
is a comics book. He's a comic book YouTuber, and I don't watch almost any other comic book YouTube. It's just, but
Yeah.
this guy is my favorite YouTuber.
Super good. You got a name?
And
Do you want to shout him out?
his name's Matt, but with like 4 T's. This dude appeared out of nowhere and just made amazing videos from the start. They are almost all of his videos have like millions of views. Like, I mean, but he came out of absolutely, and apparently he got like laid off and he's like, I'm just going to take my severance and like learn how to edit. And he just started talking about like the history of comic books. It's like, it's great.
I love that too.
It rules. So,
check him out. Matt with 4 T's, maybe.
Yeah.
Jared, I don't
3
know.
T's or 4 T's, something like that.
Is this? Do you feel good about this question?
Yeah, my favorite theologian is probably Maximus the Confessor. Yeah.
I guess I
would say
I could see that.
Yeah, probably Maximus the Confessor. Yeah.
Nice.
If you're looking for more like contemporary stuff, I don't read contemporary theology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was one of my things. I'll get to that later, actually.
Yeah.
Substack or YouTube?
Honestly, I think the quality per like minute spent is higher on Substack, so probably Substack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here, Stoicism or Pythagoreanism?
Probably Stoicism. Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one, dude. That's tough.
Yeah.
I've been planning for like a year and a half, and this is something I keep talking with people about, and they keep expecting it, and I shouldn't say it, but to do like a daily Pythagoreanism, just to mess with daily Stoic stuff.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, there's so much good stuff in Pythagoras, and like plus quirky weird stuff that's also in Stoicism, but people don't talk about. But I'm like, well, if we're gonna grab a random one, let's do it.
I feel like someone should do a daily Epicurean, because they sound very like modern in a lot of ways. But they're so weird. They're hedonists, but like they don't actually like pleasure enough and stuff.
right.
So like that would be a fun one.
They're materialists, right?
Yeah, they're atomists.
Yeah,
right?
atomists.
Yeah.
They have the swerving of the atoms for free will, so you still have some free will in there. Compatibilist, maybe. Wheel of Time or Lord of the Rings?
Wheel of Time, hands
Whoa,
down. 100%.
Okay, man. So I bought it because of you. I have it up on my shelf over here. I've never read it, but that's big. Okay.
Yeah, Wheel of Time is my favorite fantasy series. It just is my favorite fantasy series. Lord of the Rings, I think when I made my top 10 was like, you shouldn't put too much stock, by the way, in any top 10 I do, because it's heavily felt by like, did I have like a bad piece of cheese that day or something? It's just like, but when you get to like the top 3, it's pretty well cemented.
Yeah.
And Wheel of Time is just number 1 for me.
I think you have to say top in order for anyone to click on it. But most of us, like if you know YouTube, you're like, I just want to hear some books he's talking about. I just want to hear his reasonings, But if you said like, here are 10 books that I like, people are like, well, I don't care,
I had this one video called like, these books are great, you should read them.
I think didn't that one do well? I clicked on that.
It did okay. It got like 40,000 views, like which was fine. But it's funny because it was the most honest title I've ever put out. Right? Like it was just like it was just books that I was enjoying.
Yeah,
so,
that's so good. Rationalism or empiricism?
Oh yeah. I think like deep down, I'm probably more of an empiricist.
Tough,
but I have these weird views of like I took this really long, intense, and amazing Hume seminar.
Yeah.
That kind of convinced me of that you could make empiricism go a lot further than you would think, but that also empiricism is the sort of thing that naturally is going to lead you to idealism. So if you are like a sufficiently committed empiricist, idealism pretty much just kind of falls out of it.
Bishop Berkeley's just loving it right now.
But this was coming from reading Hume. This was like this is why it was insane.
Yeah.
But I kind of ended up with that view. And since idealism, I kind of suspect idealism is true. So
I'm getting there myself.
So if you think that, then
my
empiricism
concept
is actually empiricism is like a little more amenable to it. You can kind of see how like why Hume was the one who like led Kant out of his slumber.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I won't bite on that one too much. Okay. Ursula Le Guin or Philip K. Dick? I think I know the answer to this one.
It's Le Guin by like a mile.
Wow, dude.
Because I actually think that I think I don't like Philip K. Dick.
Ouch.
So I feel like I'm sorry to say. I mean, we can fight, but like I don't like Philip K. Dick almost at all.
Wow. Okay.
I think I once described him as like a man with very good ideas who never wrote them well, and I think that's pretty much true. Where Ursula K. Le Guin had great ideas and wrote them like exceptionally well. Yeah.
So Left Hand of Darkness is on my list for I think next month. I'm not a big TBR guy because I change things so much, but I'm trying to make myself read this book. So
no, don't have a TBR. TBRs are stupid. I mean, have a list of books that you would like to read, but do not have like a list of books you will read in a particular order.
It's
you're locking yourself in, and it's kind of like taking on debt. You've constrained your future choices in ways that your future self will not appreciate. So just don't do it.
Yeah, like a good way to make yourself hate that book. Nominalism or universals?
Universals.
Let's go.
which doesn't really fit really super well with my empiricism answer. But this is why I think you have to be an idealist.
Yeah, they're out there.
It kind of squares the circle.
Manga. Is it manga? Am I saying that right?
I say manga.
Manga.
Yeah.
Okay. Manga is like what the older folks go. Hey, son, I bought you some manga.
Manga is what I said before I ever heard anyone else say it growing up in Ohio.
It's like Pokemon. Yeah.
Exactly. It's exactly like Pokemon.
Yeah. Okay. Manga or Marvel DC?
Manga by far.
Oh, wow.
Has Marvel DC been good in 20 years?
Well, I'm thinking comics. I don't know. There's some.
No, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to keep up with them. The continuity is like constantly changing.
Okay, that's true. That's why I have to go to some YouTubers, because I'm like, I don't know what to buy. I don't know where we're at, and so the YouTubers a lot of times they even like work with DC and Marvel, and they're like, here, tell the audience that we're doing it this way now, or we're having another restart. I'm like, oh, all right, I guess.
No, it's awful. It's like what I like about manga actually is that it's often like one or two like geniuses basically. It's like auteurs. Like there are people who are like, I have a vision and I will make this work, and they'll work with a team to execute it, but they're like, this is my story. Yeah. And I tend to think that those kinds of stories just work better. And then with like Marvel and stuff, it's like take a character who's already established, but you can do your own twist. But by the way, the twist has to be run through like an editorial board.
And it's still not going to make sense it's not going to be continuous. Like is that a word? It's not going to
continuous.
Be, it's not going to be in continuity with the other, and it's going to make everyone mad. I wanted to ask about Invincible. Do you know anything about Invincible? You ever read any of the Invincible?
I've never read Invincible. If I'm going to read American comics, I would probably read Image stuff.
Okay.
And Invincible is Image, right? So it's kind of been on my radar, but I haven't. I think
it's a really good story, and it's complete. So there's no more. It's done. And so I love that idea. I'm like, dude, there's 3 massive volumes of it, but it's actually a really good story, and there's some good redemption in there and stuff. So I just want to recommend that to all the listeners as well. Snow Crash or Solaris?
Probably Solaris. I think Snow Crash is one of the worst Stevenson books.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, maybe there's some of those later ones that no one talks about. But Snow Crash does not reveal like the genius of Stevenson.
Yeah.
In the same way that you would see with like Anathem.
I just picked that up. Yeah.
Or the Baroque cycle.
Okay.
So yeah.
Medieval theology or the Fathers?
The Fathers. Yeah.
Yeah. Got to. Toxic productivity or broicism?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, probably broicism. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I can see that. Player of game,
because at least like with broicism, like you're gonna go to the gym or something.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. You're not gonna get some crazy advice that ruins your life. Yeah. You might, but not as bad, maybe. Yeah. Player of games or Hyperion?
Oh, that's really hard. Oh, nice. Wow. That's like the first real stumper. I love Player of Games a lot, but probably Hyperion. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Which made me think maybe I have to revise some stuff. Yeah.
You put me on to Player of Games. Really it sounds awesome. I got to pick it up. I think I want to save up and get that. Not Broken Binding. The other one. They're like expensive, really nice ones with new art. Do you know what I'm talking about?
For Ian and Banks?
Folio.
Are there folios of Ian and Banks?
I think so. At least a Player of Games.
Interesting.
Now you'll get them on your phone. So they're listening.
They just released new paperbacks, which unfortunately are awful for especially from the UK, like because they're these generic covers that are like 3 colors and some symbols or something. But they released an art book of the culture.
Okay.
And I was able to get what is called the Special Circumstances edition, which is the special. If you read the culture books, you will know Special Circumstances is like a very particular thing. They're like the secret police that like run the culture essentially and deal with. They're like the secret police within a thing called like Contact, I believe, which meets other civilizations. So Special Circumstances, it plays a big role in all the books.
Okay.
So I have the um, special circumstances edition of the art, and that's great. I love Ian Imbiggs. He's great.
Nice. How about golden age of sci-fi or new wave?
Yeah, probably new wave.
Okay,
Yeah, I think they just like, there's more philosophy there,
totally.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is kind of either or, but on the whole, do you think science fiction and fantasy is getting better, worse, or staying the same since like the early 1900s or whatever?
Well, the problem, yeah. So it kind of peaked at one point, and it
Okay,
peaked from
like the 80s, you think?
like it peaked from like the 70s to like the early 90s, I think,
Okay,
and kind of like slightly after the initiation of new wave stuff, um, and that's probably where I think where I think like the best stuff happened,
okay.
and I think that I don't read a ton of either science fiction or fantasy, like contemporary stuff,
Yeah,
like
me
stuff
neither.
that's come out right there. I'm just not reading it.
Yeah,
So yeah.
except Sun Eater. I went pretty deep into that, and I don't listen to audiobooks either. But that was the first series I went through on audiobook, and so now I don't know how to spell anything when I try to look things up.
Oh
Dang
yeah,
it,
yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. I can't do fiction on audiobook. Um so I only listen to like more kind of casual nonfiction on audiobook. And actually the last like year I've barely listened to any audiobooks. I used to listen to them all the time. Um it's funny, my priest is like a huge Sun Eater fan.
Are you serious? That's
Yeah,
awesome, dude.
he's been a Sun Eater fan for like way longer than I have.
Dang,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I was telling Christopher that when he came on the podcast, I was like, "Yeah, dude." So I had heard of it because my audience, I love you guys, but you're like relentless with stuff, and so everyone kept telling me you like Dune, you're gonna like Sun Eater, and then I heard you recommend it, and then some of my theologian friends in the theology circle started recommending it. I was like, "All right, fine, I'll do it." And Christopher was like, "Theologians are like reading my book," and I'm like, well, "Yeah, I don't know if they're teaching it in seminary, but yeah, they're liking and enjoying the
Yeah,
book,
yeah,
of
yeah.
course." You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But someday they probably will. Plato or Aristotle?
Probably Aristotle. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. All right. Socrates or Diogenes?
Uh, Diogenes is funnier, and so
Totally.
I'm totally gonna give it to him for that. Yeah,
Yeah. Descartes or Pascal?
probably Descartes, but I haven't actually
Mm,
read a ton of Pascal.
okay.
Yeah.
That's a tough one for me. I'm glad I'm asking you. I don't have to answer these. Loic term.
Hmm.
How do you say it? Loic term?
I say Loic term. Yeah,
That's pretty good. Loic term 1917 or field notes?
Loic term. I've never had a field notes that I filled because I
Okay.
always like those. I always lose them or I always misplace them. The Loic term are like the right size for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been like a guy who could actually slip it in his pocket and like
Oh, really?
consistently remember to take it.
Okay.
Yeah. I got to carry it around, So yeah.
Yeah, people always ask me like, "How many pockets you got?" I'm like, "Well, I have a leather like briefcase, and if I tell you about that, now all of a sudden my my video is just an advertisement, so I can't win. I can't tell you that I like carry them or not." Um, this one, I don't know if you read these guys. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Isaac Asimov or Robert Heinlein.
Yeah. Asimov. Yeah. Heinlein is a too. I'm trying to think of Heinlein has weird views about women and often has like harems in his books that just like don't make any sense. And so like I don't know, they break the immersion for me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
probably Asimov, yeah.
Have you ever read Asimov's The End of Eternity?
I have not. No.
I feel like so I just randomly heard about it because a philosopher that I know loves philosophy of time, and so he like recommended it, and it's one of my favorite books, and no one ever talks about it. So I just want to put that out there. Like The End of Eternity is one of the best books I've ever read by him. I haven't read a ton, but super good book. Heidegger or J.L. Austin?
Why would you choose those two? What was
Well,
what was the reasoning? What was the
Heidegger is like
reasoning in
the
putting them together?
he's like the peak like continental in my head, and Austin like started the whole speech X thing, and I thought maybe you might go in for the speech X stuff, but
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
you're
the
also
answer is
doing
Heidegger.
public.
The answer is Heidegger.
It
Yeah.
is okay.
Yeah.
Do you
I
like
just
Heidegger or just don't like Austin? Maybe.
I like Heidegger a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. I wish I didn't like Heidegger so much. But I like Heidegger a lot. I love Being in Time. I think
Do
Being in
you
Time is like an immensely good
Are you
work of
into his,
philosophy.
like, his philosophy of, technology stuff at all?
I've read a little bit of it, and I got to think
Okay.
about it more for a upcoming project. But
Yeah.
the just the real exposure to him was being in time.
Okay. So I've never read Being in Time. I'll need to do that. But I took a Phil Tech class in my master's degree, and it was so much Heidegger, and I complained a lot. And my professor's like, "Look, dude, sorry, but everyone in Phil Tech talks about the question concerning technology, and it turns out it's true. Everyone on my podcast always talks about it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
I had to. How about Bertrand Russell or Gottlob Frege?
Frege. Yeah,
Nice.
Frege. Frege.
So
Frege.
there's a good German back there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Not until you read his journals, then you find out. Actually,
That's
actually, no, not good, not good.
That's tough. The Matrix franchise or the Tron franchise?
Probably the Matrix.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Matrix is good.
I think I've liked every Matrix film. Yeah, I
Did you
like
ever
the
watch
new
the
one.
newest? I haven't
Yeah,
watched yeah, I didn't watch it.
I like the newest one. Yeah, I thought it was really well done.
I
As like
protested
a
it.
a- as like a oh, they're reviving this franchise kind of thing. It's actually like self-aware enough
Mm,
um that it ends up being yeah, I think it's good.
okay. So here's, Aristotle or Confucius, and then also okay, maybe a better question for Jared is, does anyone beat Aristotle?
Yeah, so Aristotle beats Confucius, but I actually don't know Confucius like super well.
Mm,
So that's hard. Does anybody beat Aristotle? I think you have to understand that for me, Aristotle is like really formative in how I do philosophy.
mm.
Like just like my methodology for approaching problems is
Trying to find
heavily
that golden mean?
exactly or actually starting with like what are received opinions from like people that you generally trust, like the
Yeah.
method of indoxa that you see in the Nicomachean Ethics. That is was really influential for me.
Mm,
And so it's hard for anyone to supplant Aristotle, even if I end up disagreeing with Aristotle on like a whole mess of things, right?
sure. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it would just be really hard because I feel like you always kind of like really remember your like your first love, and I feel like
Mhm.
as like a thinker, Aristotle was it. You
Totally.
know? And the
That's good.
Nicomachean Ethics to this day is super insightful, super inspirational. You also realize like I don't want to live in a world of ancient Greek virtue.
Yeah.
The but that general way of thinking is very interesting and worth really exploring.
That's like yeah, that's if people are like, "What philosophy book should I read?" I often forget to put it on my list, but I'm like, "That one. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great book. You will like it. It's a good book.
Yeah.
It's really like self-evidently good. Like you read it and you're like, "Oh yeah, the golden mean that makes a lot of sense. Courage is over here and cowardice and yeah." Here's a good one from back in the day or back earlier. This is from iWizard. Jordan just came on the podcast. Love this dude. He says, some little congratulatory stuff here. That's nice. But he says, how can we get the broad public more interested in philosophy and critical thinking? What do we do about the attention span crisis? Like you and me personally, because I think we'll be able to solve this by ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The okay, the span crisis will be solved with like an EMP strategically placed at like
Right.
certain key data centers.
That's
Like
right.
that is the only way. Until we blow up the servers,
Yeah.
probably we're doomed in that regard. Because we're just fighting a losing battle. Like one of the reasons that I actually am not a stoic in like a sense here and why I'm more sympathetic to Aristotle's way of looking at things is that I do think that our environment impacts the way we think
Yeah.
and no act of like virtuous will is going to overpower like a very bad environment. And I
Mm,
think that just generally we have created a culture that creates environments that are not good for thought.
yeah.
I'm currently in the process of converting there's this shed in my backyard that's like a wood shop. I'm converting it into an office. And the whole point is actually a place to go write and stuff. I will not have internet in that shed. Like
Nice, man.
it will be like I'm gonna call it the cave or something like that. And I will just like go to it
Yeah.
and I will walk to my backyard and I will lock myself in it for hours at a time and I will work there. And I think that the attention span crisis, like I mean, like everyone's like, oh, kids don't have uh, a good attention span. That's because they have nothing but stimulation.
Mhm.
Like they are constantly stimulated. It is so easy for them to be stimulated. And so there's no like intellectual way for us to do it. This is the closest thing to me being like a doomer about stuff.
Yeah.
Like we are just doomed in that regard. As for getting people to be more interested in philosophy, I think that the answer there is you have to show them. Okay, so what I am against is making philosophy relevant, right? Like I hate that.
Yeah,
You
me
have to
too.
show them that it's actually already relevant.
Right, right,
It's a
right, right, right.
communication issue. It's not a practical issue. It's not an issue of us. We haven't been doing philosophy wrong. We have just not been able to communicate the fact that it's actually quite relevant to your life.
Yes.
And,
I
and so,
That's so good,
because
man.
yeah, if you put it in terms of like we have to make philosophy relevant, well, that means you have to change the character of what's going on right now. It's like asking like, why should the average person care about astrophysics, right?
Mm,
What you need to do is introduce them to like the wonders of the universe and how space travel is going to open up the universe for us or something.
yeah.
You don't have to change the way you do astrophysics. It's a communication problem, not a practice problem.
Anytime I have this like beef with public facing philosophy because I talk with a lot of philosophers for my podcast, and I love you guys, but a lot of the guys, a lot of the men and women who are like public facing philosophy, they make it really, really serious and really boring. And they will like bite your head off if you're like, what do you think about the simulation hypothesis? Yeah, it's gaining so much traction. Obviously, I don't think it's true, but can you apply some of your epistemology work to this to like maybe broaden the interest in your work? And they're like, that's
Yeah.
not serious. I'm like, what? They all
Yeah,
want to know
yeah,
about it. You're an epistemologist. Can we like
yeah.
do some work here? What the heck, dude?
Yeah, you should be. I mean, the part of it is taking people where they are, right?
Mm,
And then like saying, "Oh, that's where you are. Let's do the sort of philosophical next step." So there is
right.
that.
Yeah.
I will admit. Um, but what I just disagree with is a kind of move that says like we should that philosophy intrinsically is not like worth the public taking seriously.
Right.
No, I just that part I just disagree with. Yeah.
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 Do you think do we need a Butlerian jihad?
Absolutely, we do. Yes,
Yeah.
100%. Like
That's
100%, we need a Butlerian jihad.
Can
Yeah,
you show
we
off that
should.
shirt that you got there?
Yeah, I have this my Butlerian jihad shirt, which is very hard to see right now.
There it is.
But we've got the arrows in the computer. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, we just need it, and it's not because the machines are gonna like rise up and take over the world, but it's just because it's not creating a world that's actually pleasant to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right on this. This I think was one of Herbert's like really insightful points that was just like a line or two in the book. But it's like, people used computers to and machines, thinking machines to control other people. And I'm like, that seems much more plausible than the Terminator. It's like we're gonna offload all of our creative activity. People tell me this all the time. You should use ChatGPT to come up with your thumbnails and this and that. I'm like, I like doing that. That's a human thing, you know? So if the computer made something that was way better than anything I made and it took off, I wouldn't be happy about it. I'd be really upset. I'd be like, dude, that
Yeah,
sucks. I'm mad about this.
yeah. I briefly used ChatGPT to write my descriptions
Mm,
of my videos, and then I realized like it wasn't actually doing a better job, and probably I could write the description just as quickly as
yeah.
it would take me to do the prompt and
Oh,
stuff,
that makes sense. Yeah.
and I could just do it. And but yeah, I know there was a thing for a while of people saying like, what if you can use ChatGPT to like come up with your scripts and to come up with your titles, and then use Midjourney for your thumbnail, and then
Yep.
like, and eventually we'll have AI that does your editing for you and finds all your images for you, and then you can do this. And you know what it ends up with, like what the final result is, at least currently, is slop. It's
Mm,
it's pure slop. And that's not because it won't one day be good. Maybe one day AI makes great stuff, right? That's possible. But we also need to ask ourselves this. When you let AI do the work for you, what are you doing to yourself,
right.
actually?
The virtue
Okay.
ethics coming out here.
So
Yeah.
if you I remember talking to having a conversation with a chess grandmaster once, right? And he told me that the number one mistake players make when they're learning chess is they immediately turn an engine on to analyze
Yep.
their games.
Yeah. I've heard that.
And they're going to like learn from saying what the engine says. No, what you can do eventually is turn the engine on to see if you got it right, but you need to spend 3 hours analyzing your game.
Hmm.
You need to think through it because in the game, it's about the skill that you develop, right?
Right. Right.
And,
Not
and,
turning
and,
yourself into an engine, right? But understanding the moves.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So if you turn it on too quickly, like what's happening? So every time you use ChatGPT to write something, um, think about what you're doing to yourself.
Yeah.
But I'll say, like a couple days ago, I used ChatGPT for a very specific task, and here's I had written a list of thinkers that I was going to mention in just a paragraph that I needed, and I thought I think it would be good if I listed them in the exact chronological order that
Hmm.
they had lived in, and there were like 7, and so it would take me probably 10 minutes to go check all the names,
Yeah.
maybe. And I just threw the paragraph in and said, take those names and arrange them based on when they were born. And I got it done. And that felt like the perfect use, right?
Yeah.
Because it was just a thing where I would not gain anything from doing that.
Right.
And it saved me a little bit of time. And then I got like the effect that I wanted. But that
Yeah.
was it. Like, it's in the same way that like using spell check is probably
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
that bad,
Yeah.
except that I still can't spell bourgeoisie
Dude.
because I've used spell check every single time to fix
Yeah.
it. I just kind of type how I feel and then it corrects. And yeah.
I'm becoming more and more Butlerian jihad in myself. What they used to call it Luddite. I'm becoming more and more of a Luddite. Like I'm going back to straight razor. I'm trying to learn the street names around me and not use my GPS as much. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
more I see it, the more I'm like, I'm gonna unload some more.
When
So
I
we'll see.
when I lived in Boston, I moved there a few months before I started in graduate school. And I did this thing and I'm so glad I spent like 2 months doing this basically. You can buy a month-long T pass for like $50. So you can use the subway as much as you want.
Hmm.
And I would get up in the morning and I would just go and I would basically I would purposely get lost
Hmm.
and I would just explore the city. And it was the city I'd never been in.
Yeah.
And it was a city that I was going to live in for a while and I just wanted to get to know. And it's probably my favorite city I've ever lived in. I loved living in Boston. And I think part of it was because I did this. I just got to discover all these like little things about the city
Yeah.
because I went and I would leave my phone at home and I would just get lost for 5 hours. And I knew
Wow.
that as soon as I got back to a subway station, I could just follow the map.
Yeah.
That's all it ever took. And so just get lost in a city for a while and then see what
Boston is
and
sweet too.
and with
Yeah.
Boston, you get lost in a city, you take a wrong turn, suddenly you're in a graveyard from 200 years ago.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, that's where that guy's buried, and it'll be some name you saw
Yeah.
in history class. But it's something like that. I think there was like a tremendous amount of value in that because I felt at home in that city after doing that
Yeah.
in a way that I've probably never felt at home anywhere else because I've used GPS so much.
Don't do that in Chicago, folks. Probably don't do that in Chicago out here.
Yeah.
But someone just said you can't do that in Chicago. That's good. Yeah, I caught that. Real quick, you ever heard of No Names in Boston? That restaurant?
I've never heard of No
Ooh,
Names. No.
all right. Next time you're out there, my mom went to school out there. I went there with her once to visit. No Names is like seafood, amazing, super duper good. Really hard to get to, but really good place. So shout out to the Bostonians and No Names. Last question here, Jared. Star Wars prequels or the originals? Is that right? Yeah.
The prequels are it's the originals, right? Yeah,
I don't know. You're a millennial, so maybe you like
I saw them as a kid. I saw the prequels as a kid, right?
Me too. That's what I'm saying.
But I saw I had seen all the originals in theater because they did the reissues
yeah.
before that.
Yeah.
And they're just better stories. They're just way better stories. Now, what's funny is like I didn't understand why everyone hated the prequels for a long time. And now we're at a period back now where everyone loves the prequels suddenly.
Yep.
Like talk about them with like this weird nostalgia.
Hayden Christensen, everyone's clapping for him, and which feels nice. Yeah.
And I saw it as like the prequels were just fine, right?
Mm.
And I like the originals better, and that was it, right? But my real like view of this is that people should stop giving a damn about Star Wars. Like if you like Star Wars, you should stop. You should just become neutral about Star Wars. Because it's fine, but it's not like excellent.
Yeah.
And Disney is going to continue to give you slop with occasional like good stuff.
Yeah.
And just because they know it's a cash cow.
Totally.
Like, right, they have a cash cow and they're milking it. And so I would just say you should just stop caring so much
Well,
about Star Wars.
did you ever watch Clone Wars? Were you a Clone Wars kid at all?
I never watched Clone Wars now.
Okay,
I
so
didn't
that
have
in my head,
cable
that's
as
Star
a
Wars.
kid, so
I didn't either. I had to go to my friend's house. I got Dragon Ball Z on the Spanish channel. It's Dragon Ball Zeta, so I'd have to try to interpret that and go to my friends and be like, "What happened? I didn't get any of the." Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, dude, this has been awesome.
This is like a real thing. If you go like, you will see like footage of like bars in Mexico playing Dragon Ball Z with like people there, like earnestly watching it. It's like it's so. I find this so funny, but like so cool because I love discovering something like this.
Yeah.
Just because it played on Spanish language TV, so much that people just like really love Dragon Ball.
Dude, Dragon Ball Zeta. That is the unification we need. Like, that's a big inner city thing too. Like, if you talk to like a lot of my black friends, they're like, dude, Dragon Ball Z is the best. And all the like all my like white friends are like, we need to reach out to black people. I'm like, you should watch some Dragon Ball Z, man.
It turns out it's all just Dragon Ball Z
this whole time. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Jared, thanks so much for coming on, man. This was super fun.
This was good, man. This was good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Folks, it's Jared Henderson. You guys, if you know me at all, then you're going to know him, but I'll leave his stuff in the comments later for the VOD, for the VOD. So yeah, look back on that. All right. Peace, everyone.